The stagecoach wheels kicked up dust as Victoria Jane clutched her worn leather Bible so tightly her knuckles turned white. Watching the rugged landscape of southern Colorado roll past while her heart hammered against her ribcage with a fear she had never known before. It was late summer in 1878, and she was arriving in Veta, a small town nestled near the base of the Spanish Peaks, with nothing but the clothes on her back, $17 sewn into her dress hem, and the good book that had belonged to her mother. At 22 years old, Victoria had left everything familiar behind in St. Louis after her father's death left her with debts she could not pay and a stepmother who made it clear she was no longer welcome. The advertisement for a seamstress position in Veta had seemed like divine providence, though now as the town came into view, smaller and rougher than she had imagined, doubt crept through her like winter cold. The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of a weathered building with a sign that read Wells Fargo, and Victoria gathered her single carpet bag, taking a deep breath before stepping down into the dusty street. The August heat hit her immediately, different from the humid warmth of Missouri, dry and unrelenting. Men in dusty clothes and wide-brimmed hats moved along the wooden sidewalks, and she heard the distant sound of a piano playing somewhere down the street. Everything felt foreign and frightening. "Miss, you need help with anything?" the driver asked, already unloading mail and packages. "No, thank you. I am looking for Mrs. Henderson's shop," Victoria said, her voice steadier than she felt. The driver pointed down the main street. 3 buildings down on the left. "The one with the blue shutters." Victoria thanked him and began walking, acutely aware of the eyes that followed her. A woman traveling alone always drew attention, especially a young one, and she kept her gaze forward, her Bible pressed against her chest like a shield. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, and she could feel sweat beginning to form beneath her traveling dress, already dusty from the long journey. She found the shop easily enough, a modest building with faded blue shutters and a hand-painted sign that read Henderson's Dry Goods and Tailoring. Victoria pushed open the door, a small bell jingling overhead, and stepped into the cooler interior. Bolts of fabric lined the walls, and a woman in her 50s looked up from behind a counter, her expression neutral. "Mrs. Henderson, I am Victoria Jane. I wrote to you about the seamstress position." The woman's face shifted, confusion crossing her features before something like discomfort settled there. "Miss Jane, yes, I received your letter." Something in the woman's tone made Victoria's stomach drop. "Is something wrong?" Mrs. Henderson came around the counter, wringing her hands. "I am so sorry, dear. I should have written to you, but I did not know how to reach you once you had already departed. My daughter returned from Denver last month. She lost her position there, and well, she is my daughter. I had to give her the job." The words hit Victoria like a physical blow. "But I came all this way. I have no other prospects here. I know, and I am truly sorry. If I had any other work, I would offer it, but business has been slow." Mrs. Henderson reached into her apron pocket and pulled out $2. "Please, take this for your trouble." Victoria stared at the money, her mind racing. $2 plus her 17 would not get her back to St. Louis, nor would she want to return even if she could. There was nothing for her there but shame and her stepmother's cruelty. "Is there any other work in town? Anything at all, Mrs.?" Henderson thought for a moment. "The hotel sometimes needs help. The saloon is always looking for girls, but I would not recommend that for a lady like yourself. There is a ranch outside of town, the Barrett place. They sometimes hire help, especially this time of year with the cattle roundup coming." "Where might I find this hotel?" "Just up the street, the Veta Inn. Mrs. Walsh runs it. Tell her I sent you." Victoria took the $2, thanked Mrs. Henderson despite her disappointment and stepped back into the harsh sunlight. The fear that had accompanied her on the journey now bloomed into something closer to panic. She had been so certain that God was guiding her path, that the opportunity in Veta was meant to be. But now, she stood in a strange town with no job and barely enough money to survive a week. She made her way to the Veta Inn, a two-story building that looked slightly more prosperous than some of the other establishments on the street. Inside, she found a woman with graying hair tied back severely, her face lined and stern. "Mrs. Walsh, my name is Victoria Jane. Mrs. Henderson suggested I speak with you about possible work." Mrs. Walsh looked her up and down with a critical eye. "What kind of work are you looking for? Anything respectable. I can sew, cook, clean, keep accounts. I am a hard worker." "Can you handle rough men?" "Cowboys come through here regular, and they are not always on their best behavior." "I believe I could manage, madam." Mrs. Walsh considered this. "I could use someone to help with the cleaning and serving meals. Room and board plus $3 a week. You would share a room with my other girl, Sarah. Work starts at 5 in the morning and you finish when the work is done, usually around 9 at night. It was not ideal, but it was something. I will take it." "Good. You can start tomorrow morning. Sarah will show you what needs doing." Mrs. Walsh pulled out a ledger. "That will be 50 cents for tonight, or you can work it off tomorrow." "I will pay." Victoria counted out the coins, her small reserve of money already dwindling. Mrs. Walsh called for Sarah, and a young woman about Victoria's age appeared, her blonde hair pulled back and her dress protected by a large apron. She smiled warmly, a kindness in her eyes that made Victoria want to cry with relief. "Sarah, show Miss Jane to your room. She will be helping us starting tomorrow." Sarah nodded and led Victoria up a narrow staircase to a small room under the eaves. 2 narrow beds, a washstand, and a trunk were the only furnishings, but it was clean and the window let in light. "It is not much, but it is home," Sarah said cheerfully. "You come from far away, St. Louis. That is a long journey. You have family there." "Not anymore." Victoria set down her bag, not wanting to elaborate. Sarah seemed to sense her reluctance and changed the subject. "Mrs. Walsh is stern but fair. The work is hard, but she feeds us well and does not tolerate anyone mistreating us. If a cowboy or miner gets too fresh, she throws them out without hesitation." "That is reassuring. You look exhausted. Rest for now. Supper is at 6 in the kitchen. I will come get you." After Sarah left, Victoria sat on the bed and finally let the tears come. She had been holding them back since St. Louis, through all the fear and uncertainty, and now they flowed freely. She clutched her Bible to her chest and whispered a prayer, asking for strength, for guidance, for some sign that she had not made a terrible mistake in coming here. That evening, Sarah proved to be good company over a simple supper of stew and bread. She had come to Veta 2 years earlier from a farm in Kansas after her parents died of fever, and she understood what it meant to be alone in the world. They talked quietly, and Victoria felt some of her fear ease. Perhaps she could make a life here after all. The next morning came brutally early. Victoria woke to Sarah shaking her shoulder while darkness still pressed against the window. Her body ached from the long journey, but she forced herself up and dressed quickly. The work proved as demanding as Sarah had suggested. Hauling water, scrubbing floors, washing linens, serving meals to men who stared too long and sometimes made comments that brought heat to her cheeks. Mrs. Walsh did indeed intervene when anyone became too forward, and Victoria was grateful for that protection. Days blurred into a week. Victoria's hands grew red and rough from lye soap and hard work. She attended church on Sunday, finding some comfort in the familiar hymns and scripture. though the small congregation felt nothing like her church in St. Louis. She wrote letters to no one, having no one to write to, and tried to make peace with her new reality. On the second Sunday after her arrival, Victoria sat in the church pew with Sarah beside her, listening to Reverend Thompson's sermon about faith in times of trial. The words seemed directed at her, and she found herself blinking back tears. After the service, she stood outside in the morning sunshine, and Sarah introduced her to some of the other young women in town. "That is Nathan Barrett," Sarah whispered, nodding toward a tall man talking with the Reverend. "He owns the big ranch east of town. Fine man, though keeps mostly to himself." Victoria glanced over and saw a man in his late 20s, clean-shaven and wearing clothes that marked him as prosperous by local standards. He had dark hair and an air of quiet confidence about him. As if sensing her gaze, he looked over, and their eyes met briefly before Victoria looked away, embarrassed to be caught staring. "He lost his wife in childbirth 3 years ago," Sarah continued quietly. "The baby, too. He has been alone at that ranch ever since, except for his ranch hands." "That is terribly sad." "It is. He used to smile more before that, people say. Now he just works that ranch from dawn until dark." Victoria thought about that tragedy as they walked back to the inn. To lose both a wife and child seemed almost unbearable. She had lost her parents and her home, but she had never known that particular grief. The days continued in their demanding rhythm. Victoria learned the routines of the inn, the personalities of the regular customers, the best ways to avoid trouble and make her work easier. She saved every penny she could, though there was precious little left after Mrs. Walsh deducted for her room and board. The fear that had accompanied her to Veta remained, a constant companion, though it shifted from immediate panic to a deeper anxiety about her future. How long could she survive on $3 a week? What would happen if she became ill or injured? What kind of life awaited her in this rough country? One evening in early September, as Victoria was serving supper in the dining room, the door opened and Nathan Barrett walked in. He removed his hat and nodded to Mrs. Walsh, who greeted him warmly. "Mr. Barrett, what brings you to town on a weeknight? I had business at the bank and thought I would take a meal before heading back. If you have room." "Always room for you. Sit anywhere you like." Nathan chose a table by the window, and Victoria, heart inexplicably nervous, approached with a glass of water. "Good evening, sir. We have roast chicken and potatoes tonight, or beef stew." He looked up at her, and she noticed his eyes were a striking gray-blue, the kind that seemed to see more than they should. "The chicken, please, and coffee if you have it." "Yes, sir." She hurried to the kitchen, annoyed at her own nervousness. He was just a customer, no different from the dozens of others she served daily. But when she brought his meal, she found herself hoping he would speak to her, though she could not say why. "You are new in town," he said as she set down his plate. It was not a question. "Yes, sir." "I arrived a few weeks ago from St. Louis. Long way from home." "It is, though I suppose this is home now." He studied her for a moment, and she felt exposed under that gaze, as if he could see all her fears and failures. "Veta is a good town, rough around the edges, but good people mostly." "I am finding that to be true." He nodded and turned his attention to his meal, and Victoria moved away to tend to other customers. Throughout the evening, she found herself aware of where he was, stealing glances when she thought he would not notice. There was something solid about him, something that felt safe in a way she had not felt since her father died. When he finished his meal, he paid Mrs. Walsh and put his hat back on. As he passed Victoria, he nodded. "Evening, Miss Jane." She stared after him, surprised he knew her name, though Sarah had mentioned him at church. In a town this small, everyone probably knew everyone else's business. "He is a good man," Mrs. Walsh said, coming to stand beside Victoria. "Lost his wife and turned all that grief into work. That ranch of his is one of the finest in the valley. He treats his men fair and pays his debts on time." "Why are you telling me this?" Mrs. Walsh gave her a shrewd look. "Because I saw the way you looked at him, and I saw the way he looked at you. Just thought you should know what kind of man he is." Victoria felt heat rush to her face. "I was not looking at him in any particular way, if you say so, dear." Mrs. Walsh walked away with what might have been a smile on her stern face. That night, Victoria lay in bed thinking about Nathan Barrett despite her best efforts not to. She told herself it was foolish, that a man like him, a prosperous rancher, would have no interest in a hotel made with nothing to her name but a Bible and her fears. Yet the way he had looked at her, the way he had spoken her name, lingered in her mind. The next morning, Victoria was hauling water from the pump behind the inn when she heard horses approaching. She looked up to see Nathan Barrett riding past on a fine bay horse, leading a string of pack horses. He tipped his hat to her, and she nodded back, acutely aware of how she must look, sweaty and disheveled from her work. "Morning, Miss Jane." "Good morning, Mr. Barrett." He rode on, and Victoria watched him go, wondering why such a brief interaction left her feeling flustered and foolish. Sunday came again, and Victoria attended church with Sarah. Nathan Barrett was there, sitting in the same pew he apparently occupied every week, 3 rows from the front on the right side. Victoria tried to focus on the sermon, but her attention kept drifting to the back of his head, to the way he sat so still and attentive. After the service, as people mingled outside in the September sunshine, Nathan approached her. Victoria felt Sarah elbow her gently before finding an excuse to slip away. "Miss Jane, I wonder if I might speak with you for a moment." "Of course, Mr. Barrett." He seemed to struggle for words, which surprised her given how confident he had appeared before. "I understand you came here expecting seamstress work that did not materialize." "That is correct, and that you are currently working at the inn." "Yes." She wondered where this was leading. "I find myself in need of someone at my ranch. My housekeeper, Mrs. Rodriguez, is getting on in years and has been asking for help. The work would be cooking, cleaning, some mending. It would be long hours, but the pay would be $6 a week plus your own room. Mrs. Rodriguez would be there as well, so it would be entirely proper." Victoria stared at him, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. $6 a week was double what she earned at the inn, and her own room would mean she could save nearly all of it. "Why would you offer this to me? You barely know me." Nathan looked uncomfortable. "Reverend Thompson spoke well of you, said you came to see him when you first arrived, that you were a woman of faith facing difficult circumstances. Mrs. Walsh also said you were a hard worker and honest. That is good enough for me. I do not know what to say. You can think on it. I know it would mean moving out to the ranch, which is 7 miles from town. You would not be able to come in often. But if you are interested, the position is yours." "I am interested, very much so. When would you need me to start?" "Beginning of next week, if that suits you." "It does." "Thank you, Mr. Barrett, truly." He nodded, put his hat back on, and walked away to where his horse was tied. Victoria stood there, her heart racing, hardly able to process this turn of fortune. It felt like an answer to prayer, though she could not quite shake the nervousness that came with it. She would be living at his ranch, working in his home. It felt simultaneously like an opportunity and something that could become complicated in ways she did not want to examine too closely. Sarah was both happy for her and sad to lose her when Victoria shared the news. "You will be much better off out there than here hauling water and scrubbing floors, but I will miss your company. I will miss you too. You have been such a friend to me." Mrs. Walsh took the news pragmatically. I figured something like this might happen once Nathan Barrett started coming around. He is a good man, and you will be treated well. Mrs. Rodriguez will keep everything proper, so you need not worry about your reputation." The following Monday, Nathan arrived in a wagon to collect Victoria and her few belongings. She said goodbye to Sarah and Mrs. Walsh, climbed up onto the wagon seat beside Nathan, and they set off down the main street and out onto the road that led east into the valley. For the first few miles, they rode in silence. Victoria clutched her Bible in her lap, a habit when she felt nervous, and watched the landscape roll by. The Spanish peaks rose majestically to the south, their slopes already showing touches of autumn gold among the evergreens. The valley spread wide and beautiful, grasslands dotted with cattle and crossed by clear streams. "It is beautiful country," Victoria finally said. "It is. I came here 5 years ago and knew this was where I wanted to build something permanent." Nathan kept his eyes on the road ahead. "The ranch has about 2,000 acres now, 500 head of cattle, good water, good grass. You built all that in 5 years, with help. I had some money saved from working cattle drives up from Texas, bought the land cheap and worked hard. My wife, Elena, she worked just as hard. She loved this place." Victoria heard the pain in his voice even 3 years later. "I am sorry for your loss. Thank you. It has gotten easier, though I suppose grief never fully leaves you. You just learn to carry it better." He glanced at her. "The Reverend mentioned you lost your parents recently." "My mother when I was 16, my father 6 months ago. He left debts I could not pay, and my stepmother made it clear I was a burden. Coming here seemed like the only option. That must have taken courage, traveling all this way alone." "It took desperation more than courage. I was terrified the entire journey. I am still terrified most of the time, if I am honest." Nathan looked at her with something like surprise. "You hide it well." "I learned to. My father always said fear was natural but should not control our choices. Faith should guide us instead, though I confess my faith has felt shaky lately." "That seems honest at least. Better than pretending everything is fine when it is not." They fell silent again, but it felt more comfortable now, less awkward. Victoria found herself stealing glances at Nathan, taking in the strong line of his jaw, the way his hands held the reins with easy confidence, the sadness that lingered around his eyes. The ranch came into view around a bend in the road, and Victoria felt her breath catch. A sturdy 2-story house stood in a grove of cottonwoods, painted white with green shutters. A large barn, corrals, and several other outbuildings spread out behind it. Everything looked well maintained and prosperous. This was not some rough homestead but a real working ranch. "It is lovely," Victoria said. "Thank you. The house was the first thing I built. Elena insisted on a real home, not a soddy or cabin. She said if we were going to build a life here, we should build it proper." He pulled the wagon up in front of the house. "Come on, I will introduce you to Mrs. Rodriguez." The housekeeper turned out to be a woman in her 60s with silver-streaked black hair pulled back in a bun and warm brown eyes that crinkled when she smiled. She greeted Victoria in accented English, her face welcoming. "So you are the young woman Mr. Nathan told me about. Come, come. I will show you your room and then we will have some tea and talk about the work." Nathan carried Victoria's bag inside while she followed Mrs. Rodriguez up a narrow staircase to the second floor. The house was simply but comfortably furnished, everything clean and orderly. Her room was at the back, small but charming with a window overlooking the barn and mountains beyond. A narrow bed, dresser, washstand, and chair were the furnishings, along with a colorful blanket on the bed that looked handmade. "I made that blanket myself," Mrs. Rodriguez said proudly. "I make one for each new person who comes to work here. Welcome colors, I call them." Victoria ran her hand over the blanket, touched by the gesture. "It is beautiful, thank you. Now you settle in and come down to the kitchen. We will talk and have something to eat." After Mrs. Rodriguez left, Victoria sat on the bed and looked around her new home. Through the window, she could see Nathan walking toward the barn with one of his ranch hands. The afternoon sun slanted across the valley, turning everything golden. For the first time since leaving St. Louis, Victoria felt something other than fear. It was not quite hope yet, but it was close. In the kitchen, Mrs. Rodriguez served tea and fresh bread with butter, and they talked about the work expectations. Victoria would help with cooking, cleaning, laundry, and mending. Mrs. Rodriguez would teach her how to manage a ranch household, which had its own rhythms and demands different from town life. The two ranch hands, Joe and Pete, ate their meals in the bunkhouse, but Nathan took his meals in the main house. They would need to have breakfast ready by 6, dinner at noon when Nathan came in from the range, and supper at 7. "Mr. Nathan is a good man," Mrs. Rodriguez said, her eyes serious. "He works too hard since Miss Alina died, throws himself into the ranch like it can fill the hole she left. He needs someone to make sure he eats proper and takes care of himself. That has been my job, but I am getting old. My arthritis makes it hard some days. I am glad you are here to help. I will do my best. I can see you have a good heart. That is what matters most." Over the following days, Victoria settled into the rhythm of ranch life. She rose before dawn to help Mrs. Rodriguez prepare breakfast, the kitchen warm and fragrant with coffee and biscuits and bacon. Nathan would come in from checking the stock, his face ruddy from the cold morning air, and eat efficiently before heading back out. Victoria learned he was a man of few words but keen observation. He noticed when she put extra jam on the table, noticed when she mended a shirt with particularly neat stitches, always offered thanks but never lingered. The work was demanding but satisfying in a way hotel work had never been. Victoria took pride in keeping the house clean and welcoming, in learning from Mrs. Rodriguez how to make proper ranch-style meals that would sustain men doing hard physical labor. She learned to bake bread, to make stew that would stretch for days, to can vegetables from the garden, to render soap and make candles. In the evenings, after the supper dishes were washed and put away, Victoria would often sit on the front porch with her Bible, reading by the last light of day. Sometimes Nathan would sit there too, working on tack or just resting, and they would talk quietly about nothing in particular. The weather, the cattle, news from town. Surface conversation that felt like testing the waters of something deeper neither was quite ready to name. One evening in late September, as the aspens turned gold on the mountain slopes and the air held the first real chill of autumn, Nathan sat on the porch steps while Victoria occupied the rocking chair, her Bible in her lap. "You read that every day," he observed. "I do. It belonged to my mother. It is one of the few things I have left of her. You find comfort in it, sometimes. Other times I find more questions than answers, but it reminds me that I am not alone, that there is something larger than my fears and failures." Nathan was quiet for a moment. "I struggle with that, faith. After Alina and the baby died, I could not understand why God would take them. What purpose could that serve? I still go to church, but I confess it feels more like habit than belief sometimes." Victoria looked at him in the gathering darkness, seeing the vulnerability in his admission. "My father used to say that faith and questions were not enemies, that God was big enough to handle our doubts. I'm not sure I believe that entirely, but I am trying to." "You are braver than you give yourself credit for, coming all this way alone, starting over with nothing. That takes a kind of faith, or stubbornness. I am not always sure which." He laughed, a sound she realized she had not heard from him before. It transformed his face, made him look younger and less burdened. Maybe they are the same thing. October brought the cattle roundup, a flurry of activity that kept Nathan and his men working from dawn until well past dark. Victoria and Mrs. Rodriguez worked equally hard, preparing enormous meals to feed not just Nathan and his regular hands but the extra men hired for the roundup. Victoria learned to cook for 15 at a time, to make gallons of coffee, to keep the kitchen organized amid the chaos. Nathan would come in dusty and exhausted, sometimes with rope burns on his hands or bruises from fighting cattle. Victoria found herself watching for him, worrying when he came in later than expected, feeling relief when he sat down to eat. She told herself it was simply concern for her employer, but in her heart, she knew it was becoming something more. One evening, Nathan came in with a gash on his forearm that was still bleeding through his makeshift bandage. Victoria immediately took charge, heating water and gathering clean cloth while Mrs. Rodriguez tutted and fussed. "Sit down," Victoria ordered, pulling out a chair. "Let me see that." "It is nothing serious, just a scrape." "It is more than a scrape. Sit." He obeyed, and Victoria carefully unwrapped the bandage. The cut was deep enough to be concerning, though not severe enough for stitches. She cleaned it carefully, aware of how close she was to him, of the warmth of his skin under her hands. "You need to be more careful," she said, wrapping clean cloth around his arm. "Yes, madam." There was amusement in his voice. She looked up and found him watching her with an expression she could not quite read. Their faces were close enough that she could see the darker ring around the edge of his gray-blue eyes, close enough to feel his breath. Her hands stilled on the bandage, and for a moment the world contracted to just the two of them in the warm kitchen. Mrs. Rodriguez cleared her throat loudly, breaking the spell. "Supper is ready." Victoria stepped back quickly, her face hot. "There, keep that clean and dry. Thank you." The moment passed, but something had shifted between them, an acknowledgement of feelings neither had spoken aloud. The roundup ended in mid-October, and life at the ranch settled back into its normal rhythm. Nathan spent long days riding fence lines and checking water sources, preparing for winter. Victoria helped Mrs. Rodriguez with the endless work of preserving food, filling the root cellar with potatoes and carrots and turnips, putting up jars of beans and tomatoes, hanging herbs to dry. On Sundays, they all went into town for church. Nathan would drive the wagon with Mrs. Rodriguez and Victoria, and afterward they would purchase supplies before heading back to the ranch. Victoria looked forward to these trips, to seeing Sarah and hearing town gossip, to the brief change from ranch routine. One Sunday in early November after church, Sarah pulled Victoria aside with excitement dancing in her eyes. "There is going to be a dance at the community hall next Saturday, a harvest celebration. You must come." "I do not know. That is a long way to come just for a dance." "Nonsense. You work hard all week. You deserve some fun. Besides, everyone will be there. It is the social event of the season." Victoria found herself tempted. She had not danced or had any real entertainment since leaving St. Louis. "I would need to ask Mr. Barrett." "It would mean staying in town overnight." "You could stay with me. Mrs. Walsh would not mind." That evening, as Victoria and Nathan sat on the porch after supper, she gathered her courage to ask. "Mr. Barrett, Sarah mentioned there is a harvest dance next Saturday. I was wondering if it would be possible for me to attend. I would stay in town overnight with Sarah and return Sunday after church." Nathan was quiet for a moment. "Of course you may go. You have been working hard. You deserve some enjoyment." "Thank you. I will drive you in on Saturday afternoon." The week passed in a flutter of anticipation and nerves. Victoria had no proper dress for a dance, but Mrs. Rodriguez helped her alter one of her church dresses with some ribbon and lace, making it festive enough for the occasion. On Saturday afternoon, Nathan drove her into town in the wagon, Mrs. Rodriguez staying behind to rest her aching joints. The drive was quiet, and Victoria found herself wishing Nathan would say something, anything, to break the tension she felt. Finally, as they neared town, he spoke. "Will you save a dance for me?" Her heart jumped. "You are coming to the dance." "I had not planned to, but I suppose I could make an appearance if you wanted me to." "I would like that." He nodded, and something passed between them, an understanding that they were moving towards something neither had fully acknowledged yet. The community hall was decorated with autumn leaves and lit with dozens of lanterns. A fiddle band played lively music, and people in their best clothes filled the space with laughter and dancing. Victoria arrived with Sarah, and immediately, several young men asked her to dance. She accepted, letting the music and movement sweep away her usual worries. She was catching her breath between dances when she saw Nathan enter, cleaned up and wearing what must have been his best shirt. Their eyes met across the room, and he made his way toward her. "Miss Jane, may I have this dance?" "Yes." He led her onto the floor as the band struck up a waltz. Nathan's hand settled on her waist, and she placed her hand on his shoulder, feeling the solid strength of him. They began to move, and Victoria found he was a better dancer than she had expected. "Where did you learn to dance?" my mother insisted. Said a gentleman should know how to conduct himself in polite society, even if he planned to be a rancher. His hand tightened slightly on her waist. "I have not danced since Alina died. We can stop if this is too difficult." "No, I find I am enjoying it." They danced in silence for a while, and Victoria felt something shifting between them, the careful distance they had maintained beginning to crumble. When the dance ended, Nathan did not immediately release her, and they stood together on the edge of the floor, neither seeming to know what to say. "Would you like some punch?" Nathan finally asked. "Yes, please." They moved to the refreshment table, and over the next hour, Victoria found herself spending more time with Nathan than anyone else. They danced twice more, talked about everything and nothing, and Victoria felt her heart opening in a way that both thrilled and terrified her. This was not part of the plan. She was supposed to be building a new life, becoming independent and self-sufficient. Falling in love with her employer was a complication she had not anticipated, because she was falling in love with him. She could no longer deny it to herself. The way her heart lifted when she saw him in the morning, the way she listened for his footsteps on the porch, the way his rare smiles made her feel like she had won something precious. It was all the signs of a woman losing her heart, and she had no idea if he felt the same. As the evening grew late and the crowd began to thin, Nathan found her again. "I should head back to the ranch. Will you be all right here?" "Of course. Sarah will look after me." He hesitated, as if wanting to say something more, then simply nodded. "I will see you after church tomorrow then." "Yes. Good night, Mr. Barrett, Victoria." It was the first time he had used her given name, and it sent a shiver through her. "You should call me Nathan." "Good night, Nathan." He left, and Victoria watched him go, her heart full of confused feelings. Sarah appeared at her elbow, grinning knowingly. "He only had eyes for you all night. Do not be silly." "I am not being silly. Everyone noticed. Nathan Barrett, who has not looked at a woman since his wife died, spent the entire evening dancing attendance on you. We worked together. It is natural we would be friendly." That was more than friendly, and you know it. Victoria did know it, but she was not ready to examine what it meant or where it might lead. That night, lying in the narrow bed in Sarah's room, she prayed for guidance, for wisdom, for the courage to face whatever was developing between her and Nathan. The next morning they attended church together, and afterward, Nathan was waiting with the wagon. "Mrs. Walsh pulled Victoria aside before she left. "You be careful, dear. That is a good man, but he has been hurt deep. If this is going somewhere, make sure you are both ready for it." "I do not know that it is going anywhere. The way he looks at you says different. Just be careful with both your hearts." The ride back to the ranch was quiet, both of them lost in thought. When they arrived, Nathan helped Victoria down from the wagon, his hands lingering on her waist for a moment longer than necessary. "Thank you for a lovely evening," Victoria said. "Thank you for dancing with me. It was good to remember how to enjoy myself." They stood there in the afternoon sunlight, the space between them charged with possibility, until Mrs. Rodriguez appeared in the doorway, and the moment broke. November brought the first snow, dusting the peaks white and turning the valley silver in the mornings. The work at the ranch shifted to winter rhythms. Cattle needed to be checked and brought closer to the barn. Hay needed to be distributed. Ice needed to be broken from water troughs. Nathan and his men worked hard to ensure the stock would survive the coming cold months. Inside the house, Victoria and Mrs. Rodriguez prepared for winter as well, making sure the root cellar was fully stocked, that enough wood was cut and stacked, that warm quilts were aired and ready. Victoria had been at the ranch for nearly 3 months now, and it felt like home in a way St. Louis never had. She had purpose here, people who depended on her, work that mattered. And she had Nathan, though she still was not entirely sure what they were to each other beyond employer and employee. They continued their evening conversations on the porch until the cold drove them inside. And then they would sit in the parlor, Nathan reading the newspaper or working on accounts while Victoria sewed or read her Bible. The silence between them was comfortable now, companionable, and sometimes Victoria would look up to find him watching her with an expression that made her breath catch. One evening in late November, a blizzard blew in suddenly, trapping them all inside. Nathan came in from securing the stock covered in snow, his face red from the cold and wind. Victoria helped him out of his snow-crusted coat and made him sit by the stove with hot coffee while Mrs. Rodriguez prepared supper. "It is a bad one," Nathan said, wrapping his hands around the warm cup. "We will be snowed in for a few days at least." Being confined to the house brought a new intimacy. Mrs. Rodriguez stayed mostly in her room, her arthritis painful in the cold, leaving Victoria to manage the cooking and household work. Nathan helped where he could, and Victoria found herself working alongside him in the kitchen, their hands occasionally brushing as they moved around the space, the air between them charged with unspoken feeling. On the second day of the storm, as the wind howled around the house and snow piled high against the windows, Nathan found Victoria in the parlor attempting to repair a torn quilt. He sat across from her, watching her work in silence until she finally looked up. "Is something wrong?" "Victoria, I need to speak with you about something." Her heart began to pound. "All right." He seemed to struggle for words, this man who was usually so self-assured. "These past few months, having you here, I have felt something I did not think I would feel again. When Alina died, I believed that part of my life was over, that I would just work this ranch until I was too old to sit a horse, and that would be enough. But then you arrived, with your Bible and your fears that you tried so hard to hide, and everything changed." Victoria set down her sewing, unable to look away from him. "I find myself watching for you in the mornings," Nathan continued, "thinking about you when I am out riding fence, wanting to share every little thing with you. I know I am your employer and you depend on me for your livelihood, and I do not want you to feel obligated in any way, but I need you to know that I have developed feelings for you. Real feelings. Nathan." Her voice came out barely above a whisper. You do not need to respond right now. I just needed you to know, because I cannot keep pretending I feel nothing when everything in me is drawn to you." Victoria stood, her hands trembling. She walked to where he sat and knelt beside his chair so she could look directly into his eyes. "I have been afraid," she said. "Afraid of losing this place, this home I have found. Afraid that my feelings were one-sided or inappropriate. Afraid that I was being foolish. But the truth is, I have developed feelings for you too. You make me feel safe and seen in a way I have not felt since my father died. You make me want to be brave instead of just surviving. I love you, Nathan. I think I have loved you for weeks now, but was too scared to admit it." His eyes searched her face. "You are certain? This is not just gratitude for the job or security. I am certain. It is more than that, so much more." Nathan reached out and cupped her face with his hand, his touch gentle. "I never thought I would feel this way again. You have brought something back to life in me that I thought was buried with Alina. Does that trouble you?" "No, I think she would be glad. She never wanted me to be alone forever. She used to make me promise that if something happened to her, I would find happiness again." His thumb brushed across her cheek. "May I kiss you?" "Yes." He leaned down and pressed his lips to hers, gentle at first, then deeper as she responded. It was Victoria's first real kiss, and it made her feel like something essential had clicked into place, like she had found the missing piece she had not known she was seeking. When they parted, Nathan pulled her up to sit beside him on the chair, his arm around her shoulders. They sat like that for a long time, watching the snow fall outside the window, not needing words. Over the following weeks, their relationship deepened and became known. Mrs. Rodriguez was delighted, claiming she had known all along. Joe and Pete, the ranch hands, were respectful and happy for their boss. When the weather cleared enough to go into town for church, the news spread quickly. Some women looked at Victoria with envy, some with approval, but mostly people seemed pleased that Nathan Barrett had found happiness again. Reverend Thompson pulled them aside after church one Sunday in December. "I am glad to see this development. Nathan, I know you have carried grief for a long time. Miss Victoria, I believe you are exactly what he needs. Both of you have known loss and fear, and both have held on to faith even when it was difficult. That is a strong foundation." "Thank you, Reverend," Victoria said, "though I confess my faith still feels shaky sometimes." "Faith is not about never having doubts," the Reverend replied. "It is about choosing to believe and move forward despite them. Faith and love go hand in hand. They both require trust in something beyond yourself, a willingness to be vulnerable and hopeful even when you are afraid." Those words stayed with Victoria as winter deepened. Faith and love go hand in hand. It was true. Loving Nathan required faith that this happiness would last, that she would not lose him as she had lost everyone else. And faith required love, a commitment to trust in God's goodness even when the path was unclear. Christmas came, a joyful celebration made more special by shared love. Nathan gave Victoria a beautiful shawl he had ordered from Denver, and she gave him a new shirt she had sewn herself, embroidered with his initials. They attended the Christmas service together, and Victoria felt surrounded by blessings she had not dared hope for just 6 months earlier. On a cold January evening, as they sat by the fire after supper, Nathan took Victoria's hand. "I want to marry you," he said simply. "I know we have not been courting long by traditional standards, but I am certain of my feelings. I want you to be my wife, to build a life together, to have a real family again, but only if that is what you want." Victoria felt tears spring to her eyes. "Yes, yes, I want that more than anything." He pulled out a simple gold band. "This was my grandmother's ring. I want you to have it." Victoria let him slide the ring onto her finger, marveling at how perfectly it fit, as if it had been meant for her all along. They kissed, and Victoria felt the last of her fear dissolve. She was no longer alone, no longer just surviving. She was loved and chosen and home. They married in February, on a crisp day when the sun made the snow sparkle like diamonds. The church was full of people from town and neighboring ranches, all come to witness Nathan Barrett and Victoria Jane become husband and wife. Victoria wore a simple blue dress that Mrs. Rodriguez had helped her make, and she carried a small bouquet of preserved flowers and sprigs of evergreen. Sarah stood with her, and one of Nathan's friends from a neighboring ranch stood with him. As Victoria walked down the aisle, she saw Nathan waiting for her at the altar, his eyes full of love and promise, and she felt overwhelming gratitude. She had left St. Louis with nothing but a Bible and fear, certain her life was over before it had truly begun. Instead, she had found love, home, and purpose. She had found a man who saw past her fears to the strength beneath, who offered her partnership and respect along with his heart. Reverend Thompson performed the ceremony, speaking about faith and love, about God's providence in bringing two wounded hearts together to heal. When he pronounced them husband and wife, Nathan kissed Victoria with a tenderness that made her cry, and the church erupted in applause. The reception at the community hall was a joyful affair with music and dancing and food. Victoria danced with her husband, with friends, with ranch hands and townspeople who had become like family. Mrs. Rodriguez cried happy tears and hugged Victoria tight. "You are good for him," the older woman said. "You make him remember how to live, not just work, and he is good for you, gives you roots and home. I know. I am so blessed." As evening came, Nathan and Victoria rode back to the ranch in the wagon, now officially husband and wife. The house was quiet when they entered, Mrs. Rodriguez having tactfully decided to spend a few days with her daughter in town. Nathan carried Victoria over the threshold, both of them laughing, and set her down in the parlor. "Hello, wife. Hello, husband." He kissed her again, and they made their way upstairs to the bedroom that would now be theirs together. Victoria had been nervous about this aspect of marriage, but Nathan was patient and gentle, and their wedding night was filled with tenderness and the joy of two people committing themselves fully to each other. The months that followed were the happiest of Victoria's life. She threw herself into being a rancher's wife, learning everything she could about cattle and land management, becoming a true partner in running the ranch. Nathan taught her to ride, and she would sometimes accompany him when he checked the herd or rode fence lines. They worked together, planned together, built their life together. Mrs. Rodriguez's arthritis worsened with age, and eventually she decided to retire fully and live with her daughter in town. Victoria took over running the household completely, hiring a younger woman from town to help with the heaviest work. She proved to be a capable manager, organized and efficient, and Nathan often said he did not know how he had managed before she came. In the summer, Victoria realized she was pregnant. She told Nathan one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, and he pulled her close with wonder and joy in his eyes. "A baby. We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" "I am terrified and thrilled in equal measure. But yes, incredibly happy." "I am scared too," Victoria admitted, thinking about what happened with Alina. "That will not happen to you. We will get the doctor from town, do everything right. You are strong, Victoria, stronger than you know." The pregnancy progressed well, though Victoria tired easily and had morning sickness that lasted well into the afternoon. Nathan fussed over her, insisting she rest more and work less, until Victoria had to remind him that women had been having babies while running households since the beginning of time. In early spring, As the valley turned green and new calves dotted the pastures, Victoria went into labor. Nathan rode hard to town to fetch the doctor, and Sarah came to stay with Victoria until help arrived. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Victoria was terrified that history would repeat itself, that she would leave Nathan alone and grieving again. But finally, as dawn light filled the bedroom, Victoria gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Nathan, who had been pacing downstairs, came running at the sound of the baby's first cry. He entered the room to find Victoria exhausted but smiling, holding their son. "A boy," she said softly. "We have a son." Nathan sat carefully on the edge of the bed, looking at the tiny red-faced infant with awe. "He is perfect. I was thinking we could name him Thomas after my father. Thomas Nathan Barrett, I like that." They named him so, and young Thomas proved to be a healthy, lusty baby who kept them both busy and exhausted and completely in love. Victoria marveled at motherhood, at the fierce protective love she felt for this tiny person. She would sit in the rocking chair Nathan had made, nursing Thomas while watching the sunset over the mountains, feeling blessed beyond measure. As Thomas grew from infant to toddler, the ranch prospered. Nathan expanded their holdings, bought more cattle, hired more hands. Victoria managed the household and raised their son, finding joy in the daily rhythms of ranch life. They attended church every Sunday, and Thomas was christened in the same church where his parents had married. When Thomas was 2, Victoria became pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and she gave birth to a daughter they named Elena Sarah, honoring Nathan's first wife and Victoria's dear friend. Nathan wept when he held his daughter for the first time, overwhelmed by the gift of this second chance at the family he had lost. The years flowed by in a river of work and love and faith. Thomas grew into a sturdy boy who followed his father everywhere, wanting to learn the ranch. Elena was a sweet-natured girl who loved books and flowers. Victoria and Nathan added a third child to their family, another son they named James, and the house was full of noise and laughter and life. On their 10th anniversary, Nathan took Victoria to the spot where he had first proposed building the ranch to Elena all those years ago. It was a high meadow with a view of the entire valley, the Spanish peaks rising majestically to the south. "I wanted to bring you here," Nathan said, holding her hand as they looked out over the land. "This is where I dreamed of building something that would last. A home, a family, a legacy." "You built all that and more. We built it together." He turned to face her. 10 years ago, I was a broken man, closed off and alone. You opened my heart again. You gave me faith when I had lost it. You brought love back into my life. You did the same for me. I came here with nothing but a Bible and fear, convinced my life was over. You showed me that faith and love go hand in hand, that one sustains the other. You gave me a home and a family and a purpose. I love you, Victoria Barrett. More now than the day we married, which I would not have thought possible. I love you too. Always. They kissed there in the high meadow, two people who had found each other when both needed it most, who had built a life of love and faith in the wild beauty of Colorado. Years continued to pass. Thomas grew into a fine young man who loved ranching as much as his father. Elena showed a talent for teaching and eventually became a schoolteacher in Veta. James proved to have a head for business and helped expand the ranch's operations. Nathan and Victoria added 2 more children to their family, twin girls who kept everyone on their toes. As they grew older, Nathan's hair went silver and lines deepened around his eyes. But he remained strong and active, still working the ranch he loved. Victoria's dark hair showed threads of white, and her hands grew rough from years of work, but her spirit remained as strong as ever. They faced challenges together. Hard winters that killed cattle, drought years that tested their resolve, the changing times as the Wild West slowly became less wild. Through it all, their faith sustained them. They remained active in their church, raised their children to know both the value of hard work and the importance of faith. Victoria's old Bible, the one she had clutched so fearfully on her arrival in Veta, became a family treasure, used to record births and deaths and marriages, its worn pages testament to years of reading and prayer. On their 25th anniversary, their children threw them a celebration. The house was full of people, children and grandchildren, friends from town, neighboring ranchers, everyone who had been part of their lives. As Victoria looked around at the gathering, she felt overwhelmed by gratitude. Sarah, now married herself with children, pulled Victoria aside. "Do you remember when you first arrived in Veta, how scared you were?" "I remember. I thought my life was ending. Instead, it was just beginning. You found everything you needed right here." "I did, more than I ever dreamed possible." That night, after everyone had left and the house was quiet, Nathan and Victoria sat on the porch as they had done countless times over the years. The stars were bright overhead, and the night air carried the scent of hay and earth. "What are you thinking about?" Nathan asked, taking her hand. "Everything, how far we have come, how blessed we are. Do you ever regret it, coming here, choosing this life?" "Never, not for a single moment. This is where I was meant to be. With you." "Faith and love," Nathan said softly, "go hand in hand," Victoria finished. The Reverend was right about that. One sustains the other. My faith brought me here, but your love made me stay, and our love deepened my faith. I feel the same. You taught me to believe again when I thought I never would. They sat in comfortable silence, two people who had found each other in the midst of grief and fear, who had built something beautiful and lasting. The ranch stretched out around them, solid and real, a testament to their years of work. Inside the house, photographs documented their growing family. In the barn, horses and cattle bore the Barrett brand. In town, their name was respected and trusted, but more than any of that, they had love. The kind of love that was tested by hardship and proved true. The kind that grew deeper with time rather than fading. The kind that made a house a home and a life a blessing. As they grew older still, Nathan and Victoria gradually turned over more of the ranch operations to Thomas, who proved as capable as his father. They became grandparents, then great-grandparents, their family tree spreading wide and deep. On Sundays, multiple generations would gather at the ranch house for dinner, the table stretching long and loaded with food, the air full of talk and laughter. Victoria would watch these gatherings with a full heart, thinking about the frightened young woman who had arrived in Veta with nothing but a Bible and fear. That woman could never have imagined this abundance, this richness of family and love and purpose. It had all come from faith, from choosing to trust God's plan even when the path was uncertain, from accepting love when it was offered. Nathan remained her partner in every sense until the end. They were one of those rare couples who seemed to have grown together rather than apart over the decades, who still held hands while sitting on the porch, who still looked at each other with love after more than 40 years of marriage. When Nathan finally passed peacefully in his sleep at the age of 73, Victoria grieved deeply, but without the desperate fear she once would have felt. She knew their love had been real and lasting, that it had produced a family and legacy that would continue long after both were gone. She knew they would be together again one day, reunited in the presence of the God who had brought them together in the first place. She lived several more years after Nathan's death, remaining in the ranch house surrounded by family, holding her great-grandchildren and telling them stories about the Wild West days, about how she had arrived in Colorado with nothing and found everything. She spoke about faith and love, about trusting God even when afraid, about the importance of choosing courage over fear. When Victoria finally passed at the age of 76, she was buried beside Nathan in the cemetery overlooking the valley they had loved. The entire town turned out for her funeral, testimonies flooding in about her kindness, her faith, her strength. But perhaps the most fitting tribute was the way her children and grandchildren lived, carrying forward the values she and Nathan had instilled. Faith in God, love for family, honest work, compassion for others, and courage in the face of fear. The ranch continued through the generations, the Barrett name remaining respected in the valley. And in the old family Bible that had traveled all the way from St. Louis with a frightened young woman in 1878, the family tree spread across the pages in fading ink, a testament to what grew from seeds of faith and love planted in the wild western soil all those years ago. The story of Victoria Jane and Nathan Barrett became a family legend, told and retold through the years, the tale of a woman who brought only a Bible and fear to a strange land, and a cowboy who calmed her with love and showed her that faith and love truly do go hand in hand. It was a story about second chances and taking risks, about trusting God even when the future was uncertain, about choosing hope over despair. Most of all, it was a love story, the kind that lasted a lifetime and beyond, the kind that created a legacy reaching far into the future. And so, in a small valley in Colorado, beneath the watchful presence of the Spanish Peaks, the Barrett family flourished for generations, all because a frightened young woman had the courage to start over, and a grief-stricken man had the faith to love again. Together, they proved that even from the ashes of loss and the depths of fear, beautiful things could grow when faith and love worked together to create something new and lasting and true.